And it's not that we want to hire our friends. We want to hire people that we've worked with that we know can do the job.
Right.
So,
because ultimately the writer's job is to make your showrunner job easier because you have so many hats you're wearing.
Yeah, all I really care about is, can this person write a good draft? You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin. All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about how shows are staffed and how you can get on a staff and all that stuff.
This is what I want to know. Let's do this.
That's what you want to pay attention to. I'll take notes.
All right, doing it.
Well, basically, when a show gets greenlit to go into production, the showrunner is hired first. If that's not the person who sold the show, could be sometimes it's like a younger person might sell the show with less experience. Then they team up that person with an experienced showrunner. But whatever. Let's say you are. Or,
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So let's say that I sell a pilot, and they're like, "Hey, you need a showrunner. Here are a bunch of people," and I'm like, "I got a guy. His name is Michael Jamin. His writing partner, Sievert.
Yeah.
I want them to run my show. They vet you guys. They like you. They're okay with it." And I get a creator title, right? Created by, probably shared with you, is my guess.
It depends. It could be also developed. Someone might get developed by, or if you truly created the show by yourself, and then I'm brought on later after it makes it on air, and I don't get any created. I'm executive producer. I don't get a created by credit.
Okay, and then you are the showrunner.
Mm-hmm.
What would my title be? I'm assuming I'd be an EP because I created the show.
Not necessarily.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, not necessarily. You have to negotiate for all that. You could be maybe a producer. They might give, if you've had no experience, they might give you a producer title, but they might not make you an executive producer. And that's up to what you negotiate with the studio.
Interesting. And I think from our last conversation, those aren't technically Writers Guild guaranteed titles, right? Those are because they're producerial titles.
Yeah, and it's what you can negotiate. I mean, I'm not sure if. Yeah, I was going to try to remember. I remember we ran a show from the guy. Yeah, I know for a fact the guy who created it was not executive producer. So yeah, you have to negotiate. It's whatever you can get. And your first show, you don't have a lot of cards. You don't hold the cards.
Yeah. Okay, so who in that room? It's my show. I sold it. You're the showrunner. Who has ultimate creative say?
The showrunner. But the showrunner is going to try to keep. If the showrunner is a decent person, will try to keep the other guy or woman happy. You don't really want to, but you have to defer. Like that's why they bring on the showrunner, because like you're the one with the experience. You're the one who knows how to talk to the network and deal with the actors, and ultimately you have that. You have that,
and ultimately you work for the network, right?
Like
they could technically fire you if you put up too much of a fight, right? Because it's.
Anyone can get fired. Everyone is on the chopping block. So, you want to be respectful and you don't want to, destroy their vision. But ultimately, that's why you're being brought on. So I've never had a situation where it became like a struggle of egos and like, no, we're doing it my way. Usually the inexperienced writer will kind of naturally defer to the showrunner just because, you have the experience.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. That's a bit of a digression, but go ahead. Continue. We're talking about how we get staffed on a show.
So usually the showrunner will have the first person that the showrunner will hire is the second in command. Usually it goes in that order. They usually hire up. They hire from the top down. So they hire like a co-executive producer or someone who's a supervising producer, and then finally, if there's any money left over, maybe you'll throw in. A staff writer. That's traditionally how it's done, but it's not necessarily how it's done anymore. They're kind of changing things now.
Okay, so let me ask another question here. When you're making those hiring decisions, how much are you actually looking at budgets to say, like, I know this co-EP has this rate, and that's going to affect my writer's room budget this much?
I honestly, I'm not even privy to that stuff. They try, they don't even tell you. Often they'll say, we'll see what we can do. Or often the studio will say, well, it's important for us to have a lot of voices in this room. We don't really care about experience. And so they'll say, this is what you're going to get. I've been on shows where like they say, no, where I've tried to hire people with experience and I've gotten vetoed by the higher ups who say, no, we want you to have more writers than fewer. Like I'm always like, in my opinion, I'd rather have someone, a really skilled co-executive producer who knows story and who really can turn in a great draft. That's the most important thing to me when I'm running a show. But the studios often have other decisions. They're like, no, we want to make sure we have X amount of writers on this show. It doesn't matter if they've never written a word before in their life. That's what they want.
Got it. So in that situation, have they said, well, unfortunately, we're not able to make that offer because it eats up too much budget? Or is that anything that comes up? Like,
yeah, or they'll say, no, we don't want to hire this person. That person doesn't check out with us. Find somebody else. And I was like, oh, great, you know.
Got it.
And it's not that we want to hire our friends. We want to hire people that we've worked with that we know can do the job.
Right.
So,
because ultimately, the writer's job is to make your showrunner job easier because you have so many hats you're wearing.
Yeah, all I really care about is, can this person write a good draft? You know, or do I have to do a page one rewrite? So, you know, that's like, all I really care about is that. Will the draft come in good?
Got it. Okay. So you're saying that now things have changed, though, and some shows are kind of doing things differently in regards to staff writers.
Yeah. I you know, in some degree, like I'm talking about, the industry is changing so fast that you know, the orders for shows are becoming, because of streaming and cable. Instead, you know, in the old days when I was coming up, there was 4 networks and you get 22 episodes a year. But now it's streaming and you do 10 a year or 8 a year, and the budgets are getting smaller and smaller, and so they won't hire the writers for the entire production of the show. Maybe they'll just hire writers for the pre-production of the show, and so you know, it's the rules are. It's a very fluid situation. So
Got it. Okay. So what, and we've talked kind of extensively at this point about there's one skill set you need to have to make it as a staff writer, and that is to be able to write a good episode of television.
That's hard to do. So failing that, can you contribute in some meaningful way without like gumming up the works? And you would think that's an easy thing. You would think that'd be a low threshold, but apparently that seems to be a hard bar to cross for a lot of people, because a lot of new writers simply gum up the works because they want to talk as much, or they feel like they should be contributing as much as the higher up writers. But the higher up writers are getting paid easily 5 times as much as a lower writer, and so the low writers think, well, if that writer just spoke, you know, for 10 minutes, I better say something for 10 minutes. And I was like, but no, that person's getting paid way more than you. That they have to talk. They require, you know, they are supposed to carry more of a load. But some new writers just don't quite understand that. And so by matching, they feel like, well, I have to do here's my 10 minutes. I better keep talking. It's like, you know, that doesn't help actually. But there are other ways you can meaningful contribute. A great way to contribute for a new staff writer, most people don't realize this, is sometimes they want to fight for their own ideas. They take up time arguing for their ideas, and it's not like we don't want to do their ideas. We just want to do whatever the best idea we can get our hands on. And if theirs isn't one of the best ideas, we'll take someone else's best idea. So a great way that a staff writer can contribute, instead of fighting for your own ideas, is when someone has an idea that gets a little traction, see if you can build on their idea. So it's not your idea, you're building on theirs.
Yeah. Now, you've given me a note in the past that you got a great piece of advice when you were a young writer about finding a different way around. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, and I learned that as a staff writer on Just Shoot Me. And I got that piece of advice from a writer named Marsh McCall. And he was, at the time, he had just come off of Conan, where he was the head writer on the Conan O'Brien show. And I remember struggling the first few weeks trying to, like, we would be pitching a joke or a story area, and everyone was so fast and so quick-witted. I was like, first they'd say something funny, and then I'd spend the next 10 minutes laughing as if I was in the audience of the show, and just in complete awe of them. But I had to contribute in some way, and so we'd pitch on a line, and like, how do I beat them to this joke? I just couldn't do it. And one day, Marsh took me aside, and I kind of confided to him what I was struggling with, and he goes, well, here's what you do. Instead of if everyone's racing towards this one joke, trying to climb over the hill to get to this one joke, you're never going to beat these people because they're pros. They're faster, they're better, they're stronger, they're funnier. You have to find a way around. You have to go under the hill. You have to go around the hill. You have to dig a hole. You can get to the same, but you have to get a different way there. And to me, that freed everything up. That little analogy helped me so much. I was like, oh, okay, I don't have to follow them. I can cheat. I can find another way around to get to the end. The end funny. I can think of a different way to get a punchline that isn't necessarily the way everyone else is pitching. I can think of a different way to approach the joke, and that freed everything up. And after that, I kind of came alive in the room. And then my confidence soared, and I was like, oh, I can do this job.
That's
But
awesome.
before that, I thought I was going to be fired.
Yeah, no kidding. So do you have an example of what that would look like?
It's so hard, but like
I know it's putting you on the spot.
it is. But it's like I remember like if you're pitching a joke about Nina Van Horn, who was a kind of she used to drink a lot. Maybe everyone was pitching a joke about her being a drunk, and everyone's trying to think of a funny way to talk about that. If you came out of it a different way, instead of trying to get to the drunk part, get to the part where she's promiscuous or something. Just do something else that no one else is thinking about. Because it's not like we have to come up with a line about her drinking too much. It could be, it could be another way to approach the problem. And so I wish I could think of a better example. But it's always been about just not following everybody. Come up with your own way to get around to the problem.
I think it's powerful advice for anybody who's struggling with that. So, what would you consider to be the no-nos of a staff writer?
Well, there's a phrase that's often heard in TV writing rooms. It's pitch, don't bitch. And so that means it's so much easier for a staff writer. And again, I include myself in this because I was just as guilty. It's so hard to come up with something usable and good, but it's very easy to take a dump on someone else's idea and explain why your idea is no good, why it won't work. That's extremely easy, but it's not productive. And so that's bitching. So you never really want to point out a problem unless you have a solution.
Right.
And that's been my mantra to this day. It's like I don't point out, I just come up with solutions.
Yeah, I've heard other people refer to this as being the Dr. No.
Yeah.
No, that won't work.
It's funny you say that. Sometimes people will say, to play devil's advocate, and my partner always says, he always interrupts. He goes, whoa. Are we playing devil's advocate now? I didn't realize to make it out of the board game. We're not playing devil's advocate, We're making a TV show.
Yeah, right.
So, no, the devil, by the way, the devil doesn't need an advocate. Devil does pretty well on his own. So he doesn't need any help from you.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So I know that there are some observations I've made in writers' rooms of what young writers have done that seem odd to me. Tell me if these are no-nos. Having a pad of paper out and just doodling the entire time while everyone's talking.
That happens. You got to have balls because they see some older writers doing that, more experienced writers. Even that's not really good form. Like, and sometimes I'm guilty of it too. Where I take out my phone and I'm looking at my phone. You should definitely shouldn't. You should not be doing it.
That was my next two.
That was your next one. Put that damn phone away. And I'm guilty of it. But some people, sometimes they doodle, and maybe they think it helps their expression, but it doesn't. Like, it releases their mind, it releases their creativity. But to the other people, maybe it does. Maybe that's the truth. But to the outside bystanders, it just looks like you're doodling. So
like you're
put
bored.
it away. Yeah, it looks like you're right. So put that away. I'm not a good doodler, so I don't have that problem.
All right. So say I'm a new staff writer. What time? And the writers' room starts at 9 a.m. What time should I be there?
If it's no writer's room starts at 9 a.m.
Right.
It usually starts at 10. The writers are always like, let's show up to work later.
Yeah.
But let's say it was at 10. You get your ass in the seat at 9:50, and you don't want to be the last person. You never want to be the last person to sit. You never want to leave the showrunner waiting for you. I see that happen all the time. Like, are you out of your mind? Don't wait. No, man. Be in your seat before everyone else.
Okay.
And even now, as a co-exec, if I'm not running the show, I'm in my seat before everyone else. It just seems wrong to keep the boss waiting.
Right. Okay. So next, let's say that the writer's PA comes in and he's taking everyone's lunch orders. How much time / how picky should I be with my order?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I haven't really thought about that. If you can make it funny, then you can take as much time as you want, because if you make the other writers laugh about how you deliberate, over your lunch order, that can be a funny routine. But if not, then you're just a prima donna, and so don't. Just pick something out and move it on. You don't want to hold up the room. You don't want to be, often in a writer's room, people are goofing around and they're just having fun, and that's fine, but you never want to be the last person or the first person to goof around. Let someone else be the last person, because you don't want the boss to say, "All right, guys, settle down."
Right.
You don't want to be the last person to open your mouth. And even like today, I'm always considerate of that guy. And I'm in a pretty safe boat. I'm a co-executive producer with a lot of experience, so I wouldn't make that mistake. So why would a rookie writer make that mistake?
All right. Have you seen any other big mistakes or subtle mistakes even that beginning staff writers are making?
Yeah, it's sometimes they'll fight the showrunner on what the tone of the show should be, And it's like, man, this man or woman just sold the show. They sold they got a show on there. That's pretty impressive. If you don't agree with them, then get your own damn show. This is their shot, and we are all here to help them realize their vision. Even if you do not like their vision, it's their vision. Even if you think their vision is going to get the show canceled, that's on them. We're here to help them. Hi guys, Michael Jamin here. I wanted to take a break from talking and talk just a little bit more. I think a lot of you guys are getting bad advice on the internet. I know this because I'm getting tagged. One guy tagged me with this. He said, I heard from a scriptreader in the industry. And I was like, wait, what? Hold on. Stop. My head blew up. I blacked out. And when I finally came to, I was like, listen, dude, there are no scriptreaders in the industry. By definition, these are people on the outside of the industry. They work part-time. They give their right arm to be in the industry. And instead, they're giving you advice on what to do, and you're paying for this? I mean, that just made me nuts, man. These people are unqualified to give my dog advice. And by the way, her script is coming along quite nicely. And I'm not done. Another thing, when I work with TV writers who are new on writing staffs, a lot of these guys flame out after 13 episodes. So they get this big break, they finally get in, and then they flame out because they don't know what is expected of them on the job. And that's sad because, it's not going to happen again. So to fight all this, to flush all this bad stuff out of your head, I post daily tips on social media. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook at Michael Jamin Writer. If you don't have time, 2 minutes a day to devote towards improving your craft, guys, it's not going to happen. Let's just be honest. So go find me, make it happen. All right, now back to my previous rant.
Do you feel like you've seen that throughout your 26 years? Is it a common problem, or would you say it's becoming more of a problem with younger writers?
As I get older, you millennials. But I see it every year. I see a young writer make that mistake and get fired. And they don't get fired. They don't get asked back to season 2,
which is equivalent of being fired.
Yeah. And you can tell, like, if I remember we were on a show and one of the execs like, we found this great young writer who did a year on this very high profile show, and I'm like, they only did a year, huh? And you want to hire them, and you think they only did a year because they were fired off that show. So They have a great credit, but if they only did a year off a hit show, it's because they were fired off that show. Why do you want this person? And I was right. That person turned out to be a disaster. Yeah,
got it. Yeah, I ask because it does seem to me, as a millennial, that even in my business, the millennials tend to be a little bit more entitled. They seem to think that they have a right to argue with me about how things are done. And it's not about ego. It's not about saying, like, I'm right, you're wrong. Like, I want to hear what they have to say because I'm aware, like, I may not have all the best ideas, and I hired you and I pay you money because you have unique insights that I don't have. You're supposed to make my job better. But, ultimately, I recently just had someone quit because I'm toxic because I held them accountable. Right. And so I'm seeing that, and I'm wondering if that's how it translates. But it's interesting to know that it's a perpetual problem.
Well, the job of a staff writer is you're there at the executive producer's pleasure, and you're there to make So if I pitch a line or a story idea that the showrunner does not like, or we're arguing over a point, like, I make my case, they hear it, they make a decision, and then we move on. I don't keep arguing with them. I don't try to change their mind after that. I'm like, okay, move on. You heard me. Good. Now I'm heard. I feel heard. Let's move on. I will do what you want.
What else can you ask for, I think, right? But
So
ultimately, it sounds like you just need to know your place, and you need to read the room, and you need to understand. So what I would consider to be basic social skills.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. A lot of basic social skills. And it's odd that people don't pick up on that. And I always try to be aware of other people. Nowadays, by the way, I meant to point out in my little show notes. The studios are making definitely more of an effort for diversity in staffs, and so I mean, when I see people complain on Twitter, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. From what I see, they are the effort that they're making is very sincere, and they are putting money behind it, and so they are definitely making a conscious effort to have room, just a broader range of people in it, so that more voices can be heard. And so if you're complaining, well, no, they're not. Well, maybe because they're not hiring you, but I see it on my end. They are hiring people like you. So,
yeah, no, I've seen that in the short time I've been here. There's definitely a concerted effort to get minorities and underrepresented people into shows, and all shows, not necessarily just shows with an ethnic, tone or voice.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Well, let's go back a little bit, because I think one of the things we might have passed over is like how are you picking staff writers? You talk about how you go top to bottom, typically higher level down, but how are you getting in contact with people? How are you finding scripts from new writers? How are you making those introductions?
Well, usually you when you're running a show, you call your agent, say, hey, we're hiring, send over your, some young writers. And next thing you know, you have a stack of, giant stack of scripts, and from your agent and from the other competing talent agencies. And you have so many scripts that I'll pick up one and I'll start reading. And if I get to page 4 or 5, and if I'm not hooked on the story, next. So forget about the end. Forget about this idea that, well, wait till the end. It gets great at the end. Nope, I'm not waiting. I'm picking up another script and I'm going to find somebody else.
Let's narrow in on that, if you don't mind. What is it that stands out to you in those first 4 pages? Like, how do you know, or what gives it away that this is a good writer?
Well, I work in mostly comedy, so there better be a really good laugh by the end of page 3. Hopefully, I remember when my partner and I were writing specs, like, man, we want to come out page 1, boom, with a big hard joke, like a big laugh. It could be a real swing. So I'm looking for that, but also I want to know, has the story started? How to start a story. Has it begun yet? And because until the story starts, and this is something I talk about in my course, right? Like, what does that mean when a story starts? I go into it in great detail because it's important to understand. But if the story hasn't started by page 3 or 4, next. And by the way, you would be just as guilty if you're watching a TV show and they don't start the story. You pick up your remote, next. What else is on? So you're no different than me when I'm hiring. We have the same criteria,
Got it. So a big laugh. They're taking, they're implementing the tone of the story, right? Because
I want a big swing, man.
Yeah.
Go for it. Then to get my attention.
Got it. And then story. We don't need to dive too far into story because I know you cover that in your course on a lot of your social media stuff. So if anyone listening isn't following Michael, check out his Instagram, Michael Jamin Writer. He's got a ton of tips on that stuff. And that's one of the topics I know he's covered.
Follow me, guys. Follow me. I'll lead you over the cliff.
You've made comments to me before, like the Pied Piper.
What? Wait, what? Cut that part out.
So as far as you've made comments to me before about when you're reading these stack of scripts, you're really you're looking for someone to do you a favor and to make it so you don't have to continue reading those scripts.
Yeah, I'm begging. It's not like I don't have an attitude impress me, young. I'm begging, please, someone give me a script that really impresses me. I want to hire you so I can stop reading the other 90 scripts on my desk. I don't want to read anymore. I don't want to do that. I want to, And if you're great, if you know how to write a script, you're doing me a favor, because it's not the other way around. I need you on the show. You're doing me a favor, and we will hire. We were staffing on Rhett and Link. We were reading, it's a show we ran a couple years ago. We read a lot of scripts, and it's like, no, not really, no. And then one finally made its way into my desk, and I was like only a few pages into it. And it's like, hire this guy. Hire him now. I don't need to read anymore. I don't want to lose him. Hire him now. Because I don't want to read anymore, and he impressed me, and that was that.
Yeah. And did that writer work out?
Yeah. He was very talented.
That's awesome.
Turned in good drafts.
There you go. Then probably still working, my guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. That's awesome. Okay. So now that I'm a staff writer, is there anything else that you think that I need to know in terms of how can I be a better staff writer? Obviously, it's good drafts. It's knowing your place in the room and fulfilling that role. But is there anything related to is there homework I could do? I should watch this show? But is there anything that helps me pay attention to like the voice of those characters or anything like that? Any advice?
I remember, actually, I think it was 2 years ago in Tacoma FD, the show I'm currently co-executive producer on. One of the writers came in with a list of story ideas that they were going to pitch. And I'm like, yeah, let's hear them. And most of them weren't very good. But I was like, there's got to be something in here. And it saved me the effort of, because I didn't have a list of ideas. So I was like, yeah, if you have a great idea, let's do that. And so I thought that was really good on their part, that they were prepared and they had some ideas that they were brought to the table. And I'm perfectly happy to pitch. If they got a good idea, I'm happy to pitch on that idea. I was like, good for you for being prepared. Other than that, it's a really good opportunity. They can use this as an opportunity to learn, and instead of being argumentative, you'll know pretty quick which writers are the ones you can learn from, because they're the ones that everyone's kind of paying attention to, and watch what they're doing and try to get on their page and try to get into their head, because that education is invaluable. So you don't always have to be working; you can also be learning.
That's a good note. Awesome.
Yeah.
You have a note here in our notes. Don't need joke people or idea people.
Oh, don't need joke. What does that mean? Sometimes. I was a question that someone asked me on Instagram. Was like, how does the division of labor work? Are some people just idea people? Are some people just joke people? And that may have been the case back in the 80s or something, when money was flowing. But now you're kind of expected to do everything. But the most important function is story. Do you understand story? Can you help contribute in that way? And that's very hard. As far as joke people, I always feel like that comes in last. That's like picking the color that you want to paint the walls. First, you have to build the house. You have to construct the house. So. That was actually, yeah. So that was in response to a question like, how does the division of labor? We talked about this in one of the other episodes we did. Is like, some people think that the writer's room works like, well, one writer writes for this character and the other writer writes for that character. It's like, no. When you put together a script, you go off, you write the script, and you're writing for all the characters, and you're expected to. The script has to, the story structure has to be there, and it has to be funny. So you have to be able to do both. In a drama room, of course, it's a little different. You don't have the burden of being funny, and that's why the hours tend to be better in drama.
Yeah, and that's something you once told me. It's easy to kill people. It's hard to make them laugh. Right?
Yeah, well, that's like an old saying in Hollywood. It's like dying. Was it dying? Dying is easy. Laughter is hard. Getting people to laugh is much harder. Comedy is very, very hard. Yeah.
Got it. You also have a note here. You don't need thread pullers. Is that the same thing as a doctor no? Or is there...
Yeah. But what is this? What happened? Well, but this does really make 100% logic here. It's like, oh yeah.
Logic police. Yeah.
Yeah. Here come the logic police.
Yeah.
Everyone hide. That means, of course, if something is egregious, then you don't want to do it. But there are some people who think they're getting bonus points by pointing something out that, like we've been working on this for the story area for 4 hours, and no one's thought about it now. Like, obviously, it's not going to be a problem when you're watching it on TV with with your phone in your hand and a magazine in the other. So,
right.
No one's really paying attention that closely.
Yeah, got it. All right, and then lastly, I know there's this topic that's come up a couple times and recently happened in Tacoma FD where. We have our script coordinator, Mike Rapp, who's just an awesome guy. Mm-hmm. He was actually given the opportunity to write a freelance episode of our show. Yeah. So he wrote an episode that is airing soon. I think it's episode 304 of this upcoming season. And he wrote an episode. How do freelance episode works? Obviously, as a staff writer, I'm assuming you're going to get the opportunity to write an episode. But yeah. How do we do the freelance thing?
The guild has it stipulated they have to, for every certain number of episodes that you produce in a season, a certain X number have to go to freelance. And if they don't, then the show has to pay a penalty. Often, in the old days, they would often hire outside freelancers, just experienced writers. And I'm talking the old days, like in the 70s. But now there's a shift towards giving those freelance opportunities to people who are staff that's on the show, support staff, so like writers' assistants and script coordinators, people who've kind of paid their dues, and you give them a shot.
Got it. This is, I think, topically relevant because recently on Twitter I saw someone complaining about how, I'm on a show and it seems like the showrunner just wants to give these freelance opportunities to their friends rather than giving them to the support staff. They'd rather pay a penalty instead of giving it to the writer's assistant or whoever and make sure that their friends get a job or get a gig. My feeling on that when I read it was, or is it that those lower level staff have not impressed the showrunner enough to say, I think this person can do the job?
Yeah, because that's probably what's happening is that, before you get a freelance, the boss is going to want to read a sample of your work. And so it better be really good. Mm-hmm. And, giving a freelance to anyone, it really puts the showrunner a little bit behind the eight ball because if it doesn't come in good, and most do not, it's going to need a giant page one rewrite. And now the showrunner has to do that, and and they're not getting extra money for doing that, and they have to do it on their own time. So, that's why I always say when I'm running a show, all I care about is the draft coming in good shape. Because if it doesn't, I got to do it on my own time, and I have so many other things to do. Last thing I want to do is rewrite someone else's work from page one, and so if you give that opportunity to someone who isn't quite ready, and it's very hard to be ready. That's why it's so important to be educated and to be as prepared as you can. Because, actually, we were, my partner and I were, a few years ago, this happens a couple times in our career, where the show, Kirstie Alley had a show on TV Land called The Kirstie Alley Show. It was with Michael Richards and Rhea Perlman. And so I guess they needed to have a couple freelances, and they were a little bit behind the eight ball, and we had some friends in the show, and they said, hey, these guys will do it. And we had nothing going on at the time. And so they hired us to do this freelance, and it was great. And we went in, we banged it, and we hit it out of the park. Everyone loved it. The whole staff loved it, and everyone was relieved that we did a good job because it just makes their job easier. But, maybe now if they had did it, that was a few years ago, maybe now they would just give it to a staff writer, or writer's assistant. I don't think they could at the time because the script had to come in good. So they really had to hire experienced people to do it.
Literally, there's no time to rewrite this thing.
There's no time.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, any other thoughts about getting staffed or how you're staffing shows you think that would be helpful for people to know?
I think I covered it. But again, it's all about, this is your opportunity. This is your shot, and you're not going to get too many shots, so you have to be prepared. And
preparation is have specs, have pilots, be able to understand what story structure is, and understand how to, understand your role. It really sounds like. And
like I said, showrunners are we are begging you to understand that. If you understand that, you're hired because we need you. And so it's not a favor. You're not doing, you're doing us a favor instead of the other way around.
So just another thing you've always said, Hollywood needs good writers.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys.
We'll catch you on the next one. This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with someone who needs to hear today's subject. If you're looking to support yourself, I'd encourage you to consider investing in Michael's screenwriting course at michaeljamin.com/course. I've known Michael for over a decade, and in the past 7 years, I've begged him to put something together. During the global COVID-19 pandemic, Michael had time, and I have to say, I wish I'd had this course 10 years ago. As someone who's personally invested in most online courses, earned a bachelor's degree, and actively studied screenwriting for over a decade, this course has been more valuable to me than most of the effort I've put in because it focuses on something no one else teaches: story. In his course, Michael pulls back the curtain and shows you exactly what the pros do in a writer's room, and that knowledge has made all the difference for me, and I know it will for you too. You can find more information at michaeljamin.com/course. For free daily screenwriting tips, follow Michael on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Phil A. Hudson. This episode was produced by Phil Hudson and edited by Dallas Crane. Until next time, keep writing.